It's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. Wake up, then
Hi, Max. How are you?
I'm good, Emily. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's so good to see you. And of course, I had the pleasure of seeing you and receiving treatment from you yesterday, which was so unexpected. And I'm so grateful. It was so timely, right? I haven't been able to come see you in your office in months, maybe
Uh-huh.
even like closer to a year, which I don't
I
even
think
want to
I
admit
think
that.
almost two.
Oh my gosh, no, don't tell me that. I don't even want to admit that out loud. And then here I am, like reaching out to you to have you on my YouTube. But
Uh,
yeah, it was so timely. It was such a good reminder for this episode to experience treatment from you once again. And I'll be back in there in just a couple weeks. But
Absolutely. Do you feel
I'm
better?
I do. Yeah. My leg is a little bit sore, but it's certainly better. So again, I was like very, very ready to disseminate this information about, cupping, manual therapy, dry needling, all of it to those who really need it, who are in probably more chronic pain than whatever this minor toe injury of mine was. So I
I'm
want
here to share knowledge and educate, so I'm happy.
Yes, yes, yes. So I want to give a quick introduction of you, your history, your practice, and then we'll jump right into it.
Sure.
So Dr. Maksim Birikov is a doctor of physical therapy with a deep passion for movement, resilience of the body, and really just the human body in general, right? Optimization of vitality. He grew
That's
up
right.
across
Well put.
yeah, yeah. He grew up across Eastern. This is a combination from your website and then how I see you. So
Sure.
he grew up across Eastern Europe, Southwestern Asia, and North America. His diverse background shaped his understanding of physical adaptation in different environments. Maxim combines Eastern and Western philosophies in his work, helping individuals to restore mobility, prevent injury, and optimize overall health. He's the founder of Physica Medica, a specialized physical therapy and postural correction studio in Baltimore, Maryland. And today we'll dive into your unique approach surrounding movement and healing, plus a new exciting project you're working on. So once again, thank you, Max, for joining me. And
Absolutely. My pleasure.
yeah, I think we'll start with the basics because I don't think many people have even heard of dry needling, which is from my experience working with you, your main modality. So let's just start there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So dry needling is a relatively new technique that we have in our arsenal right now. It is the use of acupuncture needles to attack the trigger points of the body, which means muscular knots, fascial knots, any kind of tissue adhesion that lives inside our body. When you have an adhesion, it makes things a lot shorter, and that changes the way it changes the biomechanics of the body because your body is made up of pulleys, systems that are pulleys. So if you have something that's pulling you in one direction too far, that's going to change the way you move, and that starts to grind on one part of the body, pull another part of your body.
Mhm.
And these needles, the dry needles, once they hit the muscle knot, they're able to release the muscle knot, which then releases the pressure from that tissue, and the body can become more neutral, come back to homeostasis. Dry
Mhm.
needling increases blood flow, and it elongates the tissue. It helps oxygenate the muscle as well, which
Mhm.
then restores its natural function.
Mhm. So many benefits. I wanted to just get right into that to give context to the entirety of our conversation, but let's rewind a little bit and tell us about your education, your experience growing up, and what took you on this very specific path. And at the time that you decided to go down this path, it was even less known than it is now. So give us a little bit of that timeline and just a brief bio and
Yeah,
history of your own.
yeah, absolutely. I consider myself a disruptor in when it comes to healthcare because growing up, I started doing a lot of sports really young. I've injured myself plenty of times, and throughout my years going to doctors, there never seemed to be a good enough answer to why I was feeling asymmetrical or just not moving right. But as I got older, I got even more interested in biology. I was a biology major in college. And through biology, that led me to physical therapy. I was really interested. Once through biology, I started to learn anatomy and physiology. I got really interested in how the body moves, and that's what brought me to physical therapy. As a student of physical therapy, I remember working for my first mentor, Dr. Cameron McDonald, who actually is right now the president of the APTA, which is the American Physical Therapy Association, which is the governing body of the physical therapists in America. So he was my mentor back in the day when I was a student. And he kind of put me on the right path about looking at manual therapy as a way of treating the body and then adding exercises on the back end in order to keep the frame that you've just created. He was using dry needling back then. And when I saw him do dry needling for the first time, this was over a decade ago, I've never seen anything like it, first of all. But then the most shocking part of it was the results. A single session, a single needle could give you as much result as weeks of therapy before that treatment. So it was a revolutionary approach. I've never seen anything like it. And I decided to give it a shot myself. And I was having terrible shoulder pain my basically entire adult life. Every couple of weeks, it'd be such an ache that I would have to like sit down and rest from the pain in my shoulder. I was dealing with it for years. And then when I was working for him as a student, finally, he's like, Max, maybe we should try it on you. And I said, okay, let's give it a shot. So the first time he put a needle into my trap, it was like fireworks. I saw stars. It was such a release. It was an emotional release. It was a physiological release. My shoulder dropped and I stood up there and I thought that I was high. Like I had so much endorphins running through my bloodstream from the release that I instantly realized that this is a magical method that more people need to experience. And I did everything in my power to get certified as soon as possible, reach the highest peak of certification as soon as possible so I can dry needle all the body, because certain muscles are a little bit more advanced, they're a little bit deeper, they're next to certain organs of the body that you need to be careful around. And you need to grow as a therapist before you reach the next level, before you're comfortable or even able to dry needle a certain part of the body. For example, anything in the chest, because you have your lungs in your chest. So you have to be really careful. It's very doable, but you have to go to classes, learn, master the method in order to dry needle around the lungs, making sure that you don't go too far and injure somebody. But I fell in love with the method. I started, as soon as I graduated from PT school, I got certified and I started to build my hours and I started to practice more and more and eventually reaching the master's level. So now I can dry needle the whole body from the face to the toes to the jaw, the temples, the back,
But
everything.
you've done all of that
You've
for
done.
me.
That's right.
My whole face, head, all of it. Yeah, well, that was something that I actually didn't even have in our discussion questions, but I saw my acupuncturist this morning as well and was talking to her about the certification and accreditation process for dry needling specifically, because I didn't realize that it is becoming more accessible to other practitioners. So can you maybe give a little more insight? Let's say someone who is not located in Maryland wants to find a local practitioner for themselves. What should they be looking for there?
Right. So believe it or not, not every state allows you to dry needle. So there are multiple states around the country. For example, New York, you can't dry needle in New York. So I actually have clients who drive down to Baltimore from New York to see me because they're they don't allow they don't allow them to dry needle. Now, there's many reasons for that. One of which is actually the acupuncturist board of authority. It took a long time for Maryland to win the ability to dry needle, because for the longest time the acupuncture board was basically suing other medical professionals, whether it's nurses, doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors, in keeping them from dry needling because they believe that we weren't educated enough in anatomy and physiology to do it safely. But over years of lawsuits and courses and meetings and agreements, we finally had the government of Maryland pass the law to say no. physical therapists are educated enough, they have enough anatomy knowledge, they have enough physiology knowledge, they can be safe while doing this. And we won the right to dry needle. But we also, Maryland is the most restrictive state in the country when it comes to dry needling, meaning you need the most amount of hours, the most amount of education, the most amount of testing, the most amount of proof that you can do it right before you can actually do it. But if you're in a state that allows you to dry needle, it's hard to say how to find a good dry needle. You kind of have to go and see how it goes. That's the honest truth.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can dry needle, but not every person's great. Like an analogy would be every chef can cook a burger,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a different burger every single time, right? Some of them are great. Some of them are like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
just like that, every practitioner has their own skill set. So I would recommend just if you're in a state that allows dry needling and you want to get dry needled, read the reviews on people's Google reviews, read their websites, see how many years of experience they have, see what level of dry needler they are, if they're a master dry needler or not, and then go ahead and check it out and see if you can get, if you can get results from that person.
Yes. So what is the difference between acupuncture and dry needling?
Yeah, so dry needling is the use of a needle for a physiological and anatomical change, sorry. So when you have a trigger point, when you have a muscle knot and you pierce the muscle knot with the needle, the muscle knot is going to go through something called depolarization, which means a chemical change inside the muscle knot, because they tend to be acidic, a chemical change that helps relax the muscle knot. Now, we use one needle at a time, and acupuncturists in turn use multiple needles and use something called meridian points or meridian crystals, I believe, which they put multiple needles in one line of the body, let's say the liver line or the kidney line, in order to relax the entire fascia. Now, what we've discovered over years of research is that your body's composed of these fascial lanes, which is connective tissue, and these fascial lanes, they're actually right here behind me, move different muscles together at once. And that's what allows us to be very dynamic and fluid rather than be stiff and one plane at a time. So if we didn't have fascia, each muscle would only work in one plane, right? So the bicep, only bicep curls, right? So then we'd be like robots moving in a single plane. But the fascia allows us to move in this 3D motion using multiple planes at the same time. So acupuncturists stimulate the fascia because they put multiple needles in different places to relax the entire line and bring chi to a certain area, improve blood flow in a certain area. While again, physical therapists use dry needling only to relieve that specific trigger point in one spot.
Is trigger point synonymous for a knot in the muscle? Are these the same exact thing?
Trigger point is synonymous to a muscle knot. It's essentially a bundle of connective tissue that gets very tight. And when you develop those, everything becomes a lot shorter. Like I have this rope, for example, as an analogy. Imagine that this rope is 2.5 feet long. Every time I put a knot in this piece of tissue, right in this rope, I keep putting knots, a big knot, a little knot. As you can see, the rope got a lot shorter now. And that's exactly what happens to the muscle. As you develop these muscle knots, different sizes, sometimes they're really big like a golf ball. Sometimes they're really small like a grain of rice. But as they build up in your muscle, let's say, the muscle shrinks, right? Which means those two ends that the muscle is connected to are coming closer together. So if you have a muscle that runs from your ear down to your shoulder, and this muscle is getting shorter, what happens? Your shoulder gets close to your head. So you're like this all the time, right? And you have that all over your body. And that's what dry needling is really good at breaking up.
Yes. I think that's how I looked when I came and saw you a few years ago. That was probably the first part that we ended up working on.
Well, you came in like this and then you left like this.
Yeah, totally relaxed. So you also use the term manual therapy. Is this interchangeable with physical therapy, or are these different? Is this an umbrella term?
Yeah, no, so it is a little bit different. Manual therapy is the specific use of hand techniques, whether it's deep tissue massage, manipulation of the joint,
Hmm.
dry needling, cupping, or
Hmm.
scraping. All those are manual skills versus physical therapy involves all the rehab that you go through. So not only the manual work, but also the exercises and the neuro rehab as well. So all that physical therapy is an umbrella term for everything. Manual therapy is very specific. So I'm a manual therapist, so I specialize in manual therapy, which doesn't mean I don't use exercise. I use plenty of exercise with my patients, but I prioritize manual therapy over movement in the beginning of our sessions, and then we add movement as we go forward.
Hmm. So, yeah, can you speak to that process a little bit? Because at the end of most of our sessions, we cup and yeah, you do scraping on me. And then, of course, you give people kind of homework. And so this is a whole nother topic that we can discuss, but maintenance is very important. We
Yeah.
need these two together, the treatment and the maintenance. So let's first discuss in a little more depth each of these modalities that you use and why.
So one of the modalities I use pretty often is cupping. Cupping is a very powerful technique used to lengthen connective tissue, especially fascia.
Hmm.
Cupping can be deep, but it can also be very superficial. So you apply these cups to your body and then you pull the air out of them, which creates a decompression, which essentially separates the layers. So your body is made up of layers, kind of like a sandwich. If you can imagine skin, fascia, muscle, fascia, bone, right? You're layered on top of each other like this. Over time, these layers get trapped and stuck to one another, and the range of motion in them stops being very good. So what you want to do is when you put a cup on top of that and you create decompression, you're essentially creating a space in the middle, and then you add movement to it, right? You want to move with cups. And what that does is it separates the layers
Hmm.
and then pushes fluid in between the layers, synovial fluid. So what that fluid does is it lubricates the tissue, and you need tissues to be lubricated in the body in order to move smoothly. If there is no lubricant in between the tissue, it's not going to move very smoothly. It's going to grind on each other, and that's going to prevent your body from moving efficiently. And it can create trauma and tears. So the cupping helps separate it and then move it a lot freer. So you get more range of motion, more blood flow, decompression, better joint movement.
Hmm.
Then you have scraping, which was popularized by a company called Graston. They were the first one to make these metal tools, stainless steel tools that became very popular, available for the average therapist. But then it evolved from there. Now a lot of companies make all kinds of different tools that you can buy online. You can use plastic, metal. There's all kinds of materials. That is a tool that you use to scrape on your body. And what that does is it helps lengthen the superficial fascia, improve blood flow, decompress, change the peripheral nervous system reaction. Also, another very, very effective tool. Then there is the traditional manual therapy, which is just deep tissue massage. Now, that's pretty self-explanatory. Massage has been around for thousands of years in every culture. Every culture knows that putting a lot of pressure on a muscle knot or in a tight area helps relieve things and make things longer.
Hmm.
Imagine, if you will, because the way that it works, if I can give you an analogy, so if you think about how the muscle fibers are formed, muscle fibers are like straight lines, right? They're just like pink and red lines that kind of look like hair, right? So like your hair kind of looks similar to that, where it's like a bunch of lines. Now, what happens if you get a knot in your hair? You need to brush it out, brush it out, brush it out, brush it out, right?
Hmm.
Same idea with the muscles. You get a knot in the muscles, you need to brush it out, brush it out, brush it out with massage or with scraping, right? You
Hmm.
brush it, and slowly the fibers begin to give and create space. And
Hmm.
that way, a tissue that's all tied up and like this, after deep tissue massage, can actually return to more striated position where the fibers are straight and longer. So
Hmm.
every approach basically does like a similar thing by trying to restore the original shape and structure of the tissue to its previous self.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And so when you see clients, how do you determine which modality you're going to use and what
Yeah.
might be the best or safest way if people want to implement any of these practices at home, obviously not
Yeah.
dry needling.
Yes. So, hey, there is no law that says you cannot dry needle yourself. So you can absolutely. And in fact, that's how, after I discovered, this is a funny story. After I discovered the dry needling, like when I got needled, I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh my God, I have to do this to the rest of my body. But so I bought a box of dry needles on the internet and
Yeah.
went home and started practicing on my arm, on my calf. And
Wow.
that's how I first started doing it, just practicing it on yourself. And I got incredible results on myself. And
Wow.
then once I graduated, I went and I took all the courses so I
Hmm.
can be certified to do it on other people. So if you want to do it on yourself, you're absolutely welcome. Just
Yeah.
don't do it here. Don't
Yeah.
do it in the lungs. Do it here on the arms and on the legs.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you have a very extensive knowledge base around anatomy and physiology.
Yeah, so
And
you
I'm
you
sure you
definitely
had it
have
at
to
the time
know.
you, yeah. So that might be a better place to start.
Yeah. But back to your question about how do I decide what to do? The real answer is I'm going to do all those things on you. What I decide on is when to do it and on what body part,
Mm.
because all tools have a specific use.
Hmm.
So you want to make sure that you know where to start, like, and that comes from just experience, Emily, like just experience in the field, listening to people, reading between the lines. When sometimes when a person comes in here and says, "Oh, Max, like I have pain when I sit down and then when I stand up from a chair, but not when I walk, and then not, and not at night, but only in the morning." All of this, I've learned through the years of what this means by action of the muscles, how the nervous system works, at what parts of the day does your nervous system react to certain stimuli, the food you eat, how much water you drink, how much exercise you do. So
Hmm.
all those are parts of the equation that I have to formulate every time a patient comes in, whether it's a new patient or whether it's the same patient again, but a week or two have passed since I saw them and their life continued. So
Hmm.
now I have to make sure and I investigate what have they done in this time that's going to change and alter the way that I approach this treatment today, because
Hmm.
everything matters and everything changes.
Hmm.
So I have to use those facts, right? Those like pieces of information to decide, okay, am I going to start with dry needling today, or am I
Hmm.
going to start with deep tissue massage, or
Hmm.
should I have them go on the floor and do an exercise first to kind
Hmm.
of a certain part of the body or help rotate a certain part of the tissue, and then I'll do my manual skill on after that. So
Hmm.
everything has its time and place, but it all comes to experience. And this is, back to our previous topic of you have to find the right therapist because not every therapist is the same. Like we can advertise that we all do cupping, we can advertise that we all do dry needling, but everyone does it a little bit different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how the nervous system is involved? Because you've alluded to that a couple times. And
Yeah, absolutely. So
fascinating.
your nervous system is essentially software. Your
Hmm.
body is the hardware, right? So your nervous system dictates, the software dictates what the hardware does.
Hmm.
So sometimes the nervous system can get stuck in a repetitive kind of memory. For example, if you come to me and you can't turn your head any further than this, right? But I dry needle you, and all of a sudden you can turn your head all the way to the left. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I haven't been able to do that.
Hmm.
My main instruction is that when you go home, make sure you turn your head to the left a lot and as far as you can go, because after you leave, the
Hmm.
nervous system remembers that you can only go this far. And it's going to try to go back
Hmm.
to how it knows to move, which is only this far, because in the last month that you've had your pain, you train your nervous system to say, if I go any further, I have pain. So the nervous system only goes this far. But
Hmm.
once we relieve the pain, you don't have pain anymore. So you have to re-educate the nervous system to go far.
Hmm.
Otherwise, the nervous system is going to take you right back to where you were, and you're just going to be stuck on repeat. So
Hmm.
the exercises that you prescribe after the treatment incorporate the new range of motion to retrain the nervous system, to basically convince the nervous system that, hey, you can go this far now without pain. and you need to strengthen those muscles now. Excuse me, you need to strengthen those muscles now to learn how to go in that direction without re-injuring themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just from the manual therapy.
The conversation about the nervous system might even be a good segue to this other branch of work that you have more recently become very involved in the past few years speaking. And this is Wim Hof Method. And obviously, this is helping to train not only the aspect of our nervous system that is playing out in the physical body, but really the emotional, energetic, mental, and spiritual bodies. So, can you tell us how you got involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wim Hof method has changed my life. Absolutely. It is one of the greatest things that I've done, I think, to myself, and it absolutely changed my mental state, my anatomy, my physiology.
Yes.
So it all started in 2020
Mm-hmm.
during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
During the first week in March, where the whole country got shut down and we were all stuck in our houses, I was sitting on my couch scrolling through Instagram, and an ad popped up saying, "The Wim Hof Method. Would you like to improve your tolerance to cold and strengthen your immune system?" I thought to myself, yes, I am a baby when it comes to cold. Like, I hated the cold. If it's even windy outside, I'm putting on a parka, a scarf, gloves, a mask.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm basically like this.
Yeah.
Like, I hated the cold. I was so weak against my cold. If you ask my wife, she'll say that cold is my kryptonite. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even tolerate the cold at all. But
Yeah.
I also knew that that's not right. Like, I shouldn't be that sensitive to the cold.
Yeah.
And for the immune system, with the coronavirus out and about, I was like, I don't know, like we didn't know anything about the coronavirus at the time. I mean, like, we didn't even wear masks at the time. We just shut down the country for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that my immune system probably could use a little bit of a boost against this new virus or bacteria, whatever it was at that time, right? That was spreading around the world. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, let's just take this class. So I bought the $50 class. It was like a 10-day class every day. It's a daily commitment of breath work and a cold shower.
Mm-hmm.
On the first day that I sat down on the floor and I did the breath work,
Mm-hmm.
I had the most amazing, deep psychological release of tears and pain. And that's just from the breath work. Now, I know that whenever you do any kind of body work or any kind of breath work, if you get any kind of emotional release, that is an amazingly powerful benefit, which breaks down walls, opens up your heart and your mind and your spirit. And it is very, very beneficial. I've seen it happen with my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And when it happened to me, just from the breath work, I knew that I broke some sort of wall and I knew I was on the right path.
Mm-hmm.
After the first breathing session, I got up and I felt like my shoulders were down. I felt my heart was light. I felt like there were butterflies in my stomach. I felt my fingers buzzing and my body was just high only from the breath work. I
Mm-hmm.
knew I was on the right path. But then I had to go take the cold shower. And I went and
Yeah.
I took that first cold shower, and that was, I don't think I've ever screamed as loud as I have. I think I
Yeah.
scared all my neighbors, but I stood there for those 2 minutes and I did that cold shower. And when I came out of that shower, I felt like I could shoot lightning from my fingers, and I felt like I can punch through a wall and kick through the door.
Yeah.
I
It's
felt so
so
much,
exhilarating.
I,
But
yes, I
I,
felt just energy in my soul. And I, on that day, after the first class, I'm like, yes, yes, this
yeah.
is the right path. I knew it. I knew it in my heart, in my guts, right? You get that guttural feeling that this
Yeah.
is right. And after that, I did all 10 days and I fell in love. I felt stronger. I felt healthier. I felt like my mind was clear. I
Yeah.
felt I was happier. I felt happier. So
Yeah.
I started to look deeper into this method and what it was all about. I I started reading testimonials. I started reading research. I started listening to Wim himself. I started reading his book.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few months of doing this, I decided to sign up for one of his summer expeditions in Spain. I signed up for an expedition. I flew out to Spain. I met Wim. I hung out with him. I gave him a piggyback ride. We did yoga together. We plunged in an ice bath together. We meditated together. We sang together. We drummed together. We went on hikes together. And I never felt so connected to other humans that were there with me doing this method. There were 120 of us from
Wow.
28 different countries. That's
Wow.
28 different languages, but we all got together under the same roof, under the same belief that we could heal through breath work, we could heal through meditation, we could heal through cold water.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back and I kept doing it. And I decided to become an instructor. So the next year, I flew out to Spain again and I got level 1 certified. The next year, I flew out to, where did we go? Norway, and I got and I got certified in my level 2. And I teach courses now here in Baltimore. I take people, and you are one of my pupils.
Mm-hmm.
I take people through the science, through the research, and I teach them how to become more resilient.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I've gone back to Norway and I've hiked. We did an hour and a half hike in nothing but our shorts and our shoes in negative 17 degrees Celsius weather in the snow. I've carved through 6 inches worth of ice to jump in the water and stay there. I've jogged barefooted in the snow for 30 minutes. It's been an incredible journey, and every single event has made me stronger and more resilient. And what's
Yes.
beautiful about this method is that the science supports it. There is incredible amount of robust research around the world
Mm-hmm.
that supports cold exposure and what it does. For
Mm-hmm.
example, when Wim first was coming up and trying to prove to the world that his method can revolutionize science, a lot of people didn't believe him. So he decided to become sort of like a guinea pig,
Yeah.
to have scientists test on him and what he's capable of doing. And one of the first things that he did was he climbed Mount Kilimanjaro to the top wearing nothing but shorts. And before that, the record to achieve this was 6 days, right? So
Yeah.
6 days, 6 days to get to the top with a team. That means with oxygen, with tents, with food. And that was the record. Wim said he was going to do it in 3 days, ended up doing it in 28 hours, just a little over a single day. And scientists from around the world came to watch him because they couldn't believe this was possible, and it was. So when they saw this, they're like, we have to rethink what the human body is capable of doing, because this is literally impossible, but you proved the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, many people have done it.
Mm-hmm.
So he proved that was possible, that you could train your body to do that. And what we've learned through experiments is that when you expose yourself to cold, you expose yourself to an acute stressor. When you expose yourself to an acute stressor, the body grows. It's kind of like exercise, right? If you exercise for an hour a day, that's really good for you. It's an acute stressor. Chronic stress would be something else, right? If you exercise for 6 hours a day, that might not be so good for you. You might tear something, you might hurt yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you expose yourself to cold water, 2 minutes per day
Mm-hmm.
is plenty. That is an acute stressor to start to build resilience. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this resilience comes in many forms. So basically, when you get into the cold water, a number of systems begin to work. One of the main ones is the release of dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical of pursuit. The more dopamine we have in our bloodstreams, the more we want to live life. For example, people are depressed, don't have any dopamine in their bloodstream. This is why the antidepressant medication focuses on dopamine channels to increase dopamine, right? So when you go into the cold water, you get a dopamine increase over 250% more dopamine than before, which means for the next week, you're coursing through dopamine, which makes you very, very involved in life. It makes you want to go out, go to work, uh, pursue a mate, go out with your friends, do things and live life. This is one of the best benefits from the cold exposure. The other things that happens is an increase, a 350% increase in metabolic rate.
There
There's
you
a 350% increase in your metabolism, which means you start to burn calories. And when you burn those calories, what your body does is it starts to convert yellow fat into brown fat. The reason why brown fat is brown is because it's packed with mitochondria. Mitochondria, if you remember eighth grade science class, is the powerhouse of the cell. It's what produces ATP, which is the actual how we measure energy in the body. So we measure distance by feet and meters, we measure weight by kilograms and pounds, and we measure energy by ATP. So the more ATP, the more energy you have in your body, which means you're less tired at the end of the day, which means you're less tired after a workout. You just have the more brown fat, the more mitochondria, the more ATP. And those are some of the biggest benefits to the method, not to mention the release of norepinephrine, which then is reducing the inflammation in the body. And the less inflammation you have in the body, the more serotonin your brain can excrete. And serotonin is the chemical of happiness. So more serotonin, right? I get a lot of serotonin when I squeeze my cat and I squeeze him really hard and I give him a kiss on the head. A lot of serotonin in my brain gets released. And I feel really good. The cat, maybe, but I feel amazing.
Yeah. Well, these are all such relevant problems, not only in modern society, but especially the Western world in America.
Yeah.
Energy, chronic fatigue is such a terrible problem. I mean, most of us are running off of coffee and adrenaline, and
Yeah.
this is causing lots of downstream problems. But then, especially talking about depression and anxiety, we have that lack of motivation, of drive, of zeal for life is preventing so many people from pursuing treatment itself. It is that's why depression is so dangerous, because there is a built-in barrier to recovery. And so exactly like in my experience, where when I began cold exposure, unbeknownst to me, it changed everything within 24 hours. And of course, this is not a one size fits all approach, and it might not be as effective for everyone, but it it is an option. It is a substantial treatment option, which is just mind-blowing that when we create the right circumstances within and around us, the body knows what to do. The body releases its own medicine according to that adaptation pathway. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. Speaking of the body releasing its own medicine, just one thing I want to add is placebo. Placebo is the most magical, mysterious thing that your body does. Most doctors discard placebo as if, oh, it's just placebo. The medicine's not really working. But I'll give you an example, right? Like, let's say there's two groups and they're taking a medication for a specific disease. One group gets the medication, the other group gets a placebo, right? It's sugar pills, it's not real drugs. And some of the people who are taking the medication get better, but then some of the people who are taking the fake medication, the sugar pill, also get better. How is that possible? Doctors and researchers will say, "Oh, it's just placebo." Yeah, that's what you should be studying. How is it possible that because the person believed that they took the medication and they got better, that means your brain, your nervous system literally cured you just
Yeah,
by believing that you're healing, you've
yeah,
healed. That's what should be studied, not
yeah,
the drugs, but how is it that we can believe and we can heal, and then we heal. That's the mechanism that we should be researching and pouring all our money into it right now. That the human body a living creature can heal just by believing that they can. But
Yeah. Well, what they don't want to pour their money into proving that that's true, because how do you make money off of
how
someone
do you make money,
who
right? How
is
do you make money off drugs
self-healing?
if they don't take them?
Yeah, exactly. When we realize we can heal ourselves and help ourselves in this way, we
Yeah,
become so empowered, and
yeah.
individuals who are empowered become a threat to the powers that be.
You
So
profit. Yeah,
it is so fascinating, though, and this is a lot of it's being proven more and more through metaphysics that the mind can create reality, very matter of factly.
yeah.
Um, so thank you for bringing up that really important point.
But your mindset also hardens within those 2 minutes. For example, if you get into the water for 2 minutes, your brain is screaming and begging you for you to exit the cold water because it's trying to protect you, right? You
Hmm.
go into this fight or flight state.
Hmm.
But if you can override that and say, no, brain, I'm okay, just breathe, relax. I can do this. Millions of people have done this around the world. I can do this as well. And you overwrite those thoughts and you calm your breath down and you calm your body down and you stay in that water for 2 minutes. Then when you come out, what you're building is resilience to stress. The next time that you're out and about in the real world and you get into a stressful situation, whether it's a fender bender or a fight with your spouse or stress from your boss or problems with your friend, whatever the stressor is, because we cannot stop stress. Stress is going to come. What we can do is we can alter the way that we perceive stress and how we react to stress, right?
Hmm.
So because you've trained yourself to be in a cold water and be okay with stress, your brain is prepared for
Hmm.
the next time you're in a stressful situation to stay calm, to solve the problem with logic and tactics rather than be emotional and like solve the problem through chaos, right? Without thinking of the right and without thinking of the proper movements and the proper steps.
Hmm.
So you're training not only your body but your mind in the cold water.
Hmm.
So it's been proven time and time again how much resilience you build through that. So
Hmm.
years of doing that, you can become an extremely resilient person just by exposing yourself to a little bit of cold water for a very short amount of time. Even once a week is enough,
Yeah.
but once a day is even better.
Yeah. Yes. At the beginning of this conversation, I was going to say, not pictured is your giant cold plunge that's right across
Yeah,
from you on the other side of your camera.
that's right. That's right.
So yeah, you're fully sold on it now, but that was
Yeah.
such a thorough explanation. Thank you so much. Wim Hof is an incredible human. And if you research anything from this episode, maybe make it be him, because the amount of incredible things he's accomplished and proven and led other people to do has been so fascinating. Like you said, pushing the limits of the human body, creating a new paradigm for what is possible in this physical form. uh
Yeah,
he's just
exactly.
set such an incredible new precedent, and a really interesting story. When I came to your workshop, I had already been working with Wim Hof Method for some time, and it not only provided an incredible experience the second you started using it, but I had the same happening, which was the fact that it was at a time when I was very sick, very mentally ill. I was suicidal, I was self-harming, I was like not okay. And I saw a holistic psychiatrist, and I'd seen a lot of therapists and psychiatrists prior to this. And this man, who I'm very, very close with, such a beautiful, kind soul, and I likely will have him on this show as well. He really listened to what I was saying about like not wanting to go on medicine, but also knowing this is not me. Like whatever I've been experiencing chronically, depression and anxiety wise for the past 10 to 20 years, like isn't me, help me. And he prescribed me on the phone in that moment, right? Actually, during COVID times, to do Wim Hof. He like sent me a video on YouTube and was like, do this breath every day, cold showers every day for the next 3 to 5 days, and then we'll talk. And literally instantly, I wasn't healed, but I was snapped out of it. And it is that that mental training, that resilience. And it was the segue to this conversation of talking about retraining the nervous system of like, oh, I can move my head that way. It's retraining the brain to be like, oh, I don't have to go down that path of worst case scenario. Oh, I don't have to react and lash out in this area of life. It is so much repatterning and reprogramming. And I think that is also what you encourage in your work, like you said, where you also give these exercises as homework for the physical body. And then I feel like Wim Hof has provided such a strong component to the mental, emotional body that also needs to be in lockstep, right? Like as we are reawakening certain aspects of our physical being, we need to be able to handle that and vice versa, like
Yeah.
mental capacity wise. I also wanted to inquire about something that you touched on with your first dry needling experience, which was that of this massive emotional release. And I've cried multiple times on your table, not necessarily because of pain, although I hold so much physical tension. I hold so much stress in my physical body, but emotional release has happened to me on more than one occasion in a massive, massive way through dry needling, through cupping. It's so fascinating. So I want to hear you speak about that a little bit because I'm sure this is something you see quite often.
Yeah, so it's called a somatic release. And basically our connective tissue in the body, it holds memories, it holds traumas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we evolved to not only remember things with our mind, but also remember things with our body. And I think perhaps it is a way of dealing with pain and with emotional trauma to store things in the body rather than in our mind. For
Mm,
example, let's say I'm treating a person and and they come in with hip pain, so I start treating the hip,
mm-hmm.
and I decide, you know what, this pain is coming from somewhere else. I think it might be coming from your ankle. We need to look at the ankle to make the hip feel better. And the person's like, yeah, but I don't feel pain in my ankle. I'm like, yeah, I understand that, but it's based on what I'm feeling. I think it's coming from there, so that would allow me to do that. So then I would go work on the ankle, and let's say I dry needle an area around the ankle, like a muscle around the ankle, and all of a sudden, not from pain, but from some sort of emotional release, the patient begins to slowly tear up or gets really emotional. And they're almost confused as why this is happening. But then a few minutes later, they're like, oh my God, Max, I just remembered when I was 16 years old, I remember riding on my bicycle and I fell and I broke this ankle.
Mm,
And I totally forgot about it. I haven't thought of it in 30 years, but the pain that I'm feeling right now in my ankle, that's the pain I remember feeling when I was that young.
mm,
And all of a sudden, they have this like breakdown. And all of a sudden, their hip feels better.
mm-hmm.
So that memory, that trauma might have been stored in that part of the body so that the brain doesn't have to think about it over and over and over and over again.
Mm,
And that somatic release is extremely powerful because it breaks down a wall. It opens up a path in you, or opens up a part of your soul that was kind of like shut down and closed off.
mm-hmm.
So that somatic release can be achieved by many ways. It can be achieved by the breath work. It can be achieved by manual releases. It can even be achieved through a cold plunge. I've seen many people get in the water, sit in the water, calm themselves down. All of a sudden, they get emotional, and they even say, Max, I'm not even cold anymore, but I don't know why I'm getting emotional. Yeah, they're breaking through something, some sort of piece of them that is tied up, a piece of their soul, a piece of their energy
Mm-hmm.
that has not had this kind of stimulation. And once it has that stimulation from the first time, the body doesn't even know how to react. So it comes out as tears or, or sadness or, hyperventilating sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you ever experience people who you're working on extensively and they're so closed off, they're like running into these blocks, like shove stuff down or have trauma and they have a hard time getting to the point of release, would you say it's just a matter of maybe finding the right modality to use?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's the right therapist.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
have to feel comfortable with a therapist in order to have that kind of release.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're not going to let it happen.
Mm,
You're going to hold on to it because you're going to feel something coming up and your nervous system is going to shut that down
mm,
because exposing yourself like that, exposing that vulnerability is
mm-hmm.
very difficult for people. People
Mm-hmm.
don't like being vulnerable with strangers, right? And people, when they come to me at first, I'm a stranger. I'm a great therapist, but I'm a stranger to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people will be tight. They're going to hold their cards close to your chest. And a good therapist is going to ask the right question, have the right bedside manner, have the right tools at their disposal, but also be able to guide you. So sometimes when I work on a diaphragm, for example, I know that stimulating the diaphragm can cause a lot of somatic releases through my experience. So I warn people, like for example, Emily, if you were to come in, right, and I'll be working on your diaphragm, I say, Emily, sometimes you might feel really emotional.
Mm-hmm.
You might feel a lot of overwhelming sensation, like when I work on the diaphragm. If you feel like you need to let things go, let them go. Do not hold them because it's better to let things go. And the patient, like, okay, you kind of give permission, right, to the
Mm-hmm.
patient to be more vulnerable. And then it happens, or maybe it doesn't, but it takes the right therapist with the right tool,
Mm-hmm.
um, with the right knowledge to slowly unwind those tight knots of whether if it's knots of the heart or
Mm-hmm.
knots of the body.
Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating how
Mm.
they are so intricately connected, all of it. And this is one of the main reasons I wanted to speak to you and have you on is because you have a gift for, reaching this level of healing with a lot of your patients and your clients. And this is what we need more of. We need more providers and practitioners who are taking a completely comprehensive approach. And it's so interesting to me, it always has been that these types of happenings are referred to as alternative, like the combination of the fact that you are using breath work or these techniques that a lot of people haven't heard of, but it is getting back to the basics of what it means to be fully human. We cannot isolate the body from the mind anymore, and we can't ignore the emotions and the spirit. It is all one thing. And as I was
That's right.
explaining before, like we have to take it in lockstep. Like if we're just focused on our physical health, that can only take us so far because subconsciously there are these things that are being stored or hidden or sequestered off in the system. So when we use a multimodality approach, the healing is exponential. It's so incredible.
Absolutely. I call them the pillars of health. There are multiple pillars of health, and you could argue how many pillars there are, but
Hmm.
physical body is just one. Then you
Hmm.
have your stress management techniques, breath work, water intake, nutrition, family support, right? Friends or family support. You have all these different pieces that make a human a human. And when
Hmm.
you only focus on one or two of them, you're just not going to live a very fulfilling life or a very healthy life, maybe, because we're talking about health. You're not
Hmm.
going to live a very healthy life. Like your system will break. I mean, like without going too deep into it, but one of the things we hear all the time is loneliness kills more people in America than cigarette smoking, right?
Yes.
And that's another piece of health that we always have to work on is your social network, whether it's and not the apps, but like
Yeah.
real in-person social network, like your
Yeah.
family, friends, your spouse, your pets, like
Yeah.
all these beings, right? All these beings create and form who you are. Like
Yeah.
they say that you are the average of the five closest people to you.
Hmm.
So it's like another way of saying it, how important your social circle is.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you could give one piece of advice, one practice, one tip to someone at home who wants to start on this work immediately, what would be the most accessible way to do so? Maybe it sounds like almost something within Wim Hof, breath work, or cold showers, or is there a physical exercise that really helps people drop into the body or to safely releasing trauma or stored emotion?
In terms of an exercise, that's a really tough one because everyone has so many different restrictions to what they can do. But the one thing in terms of exercise I would recommend to people is go walking. You need
Mm,
to walk more. People need to walk more. People evolved to walk. We evolved to travel. We were hunter-gatherers for a long time before we were computer engineers and desk workers.
yeah.
So human beings do not walk enough, and
Yeah.
walking movement is life.
Yeah.
If you think about what is healthier, a river or swamp, a river, because it moves.
Mm-hmm.
So humans are healthier when they move, when they walk. It'll
Mm-hmm.
be nice to run, don't get me wrong. Like running is great, but most people can't run. But
Mm-hmm.
most people can walk.
Mm-hmm.
And when you walk, you're improving blood flow, you're moving lymph, your cardiovascular is working better.
Mm-hmm.
You're living because you're moving from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in terms of one thing people should look for, that's a little bit of a tough one because what I like to say is I always recommend professionals. You have to find a pro in something that you want to work with. If
Mm-hmm.
you want to do the Wim Hof method, it's perfectly fine to look things up online and and follow an online video. I think that's great and that's really accessible to a lot of people. But if you really want to get into it, I think you have to find someone who does it and
Mm-hmm.
join that group. You want to
Mm-hmm.
have other humans tell you what it's like. You want to be surrounded by other people who are doing the same thing because humans are social creatures. We are pack creatures. We're pack animals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to find your group of people that do the same thing as you because it not only will be encouraging to look at them to do the same thing, but they'll also reinforce you because the group already understands that there is strength in numbers and they would want more numbers with them. So
Mm-hmm.
finding people that are like you that want to do the same thing, whatever physical activity it is, whether it's biking or walking or doing the Wim Hof method, which I highly recommend. But you have to do something. Like the
Mm-hmm.
biggest, most important lesson I can tell someone is just do something. Just stop waiting because preparation is great, but if all you do is prepare and think about doing something, but you don't actually do it,
Yeah.
what the hell are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
like you just
Yeah.
gotta just just do it. Whatever it is you want to do, just do it. And
Yeah.
it's gonna be easier to do more and more of.
Yeah. Not letting our own fear get in our way as it
Yeah.
often does. And I don't think there's any final level of preparedness. I think anytime you try something new or put yourself out there, whether it's a new skill or, yeah, immersing yourself in a group of strangers, there is going to be a level of discomfort. But on my recent episode talking with Ren, this is the threshold. What is on the other side of fear is always something so beautiful if you're reading your intuition right. Like, I'm not talking about jumping into, great white infested waters and thinking that level of fear is a good idea, but whatever your edge is questioning, what is the discomfort here? And sometimes I feel like this type of work makes that very clear. Like when I come to see you and I have a large physical or emotional release, like what was the barrier that kept me from reaching out to you for 2 months and scheduling that appointment? It's like the ego kind of sees what's coming and it knows what's on the other side of that and it will
Mm.
do what it can do to stop you. And this is the perplexing part about being human is this part of self that's kind of always working against us. Right, because it has our best interest. It wants to keep us safe and sound and secure,
Mhm.
but it also keeps us from living a life that can be so much bigger and more beautiful and connected and loving and magnificent and healed.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
are our own worst enemy sometimes.
Yeah, certainly. So, really quick, I want you to talk for just a couple minutes before we get to our lightning round questions about your new project.
Sure, yes. So for the last few years, I've been working on a project that involves my personal passion and love for the bathhouse culture. The bathhouse culture is universal. Every ancient civilization, as far as time goes,
Mhm.
had a bathhouse culture. The Romans, the Greeks, the Sumerians, one of the most ancient civilizations, the Russians, the Swedes, the Germans, the Austrians, the Koreans, the Japanese, the even the Aztecs
Mhm.
had a bathhouse culture. And the
Mhm.
bathhouse culture involves being surrounded in hot water with other people.
Mhm.
There is a really great research paper that talks about how a bunch of archaeologists went around the world and explored different hot springs around the world, and they were able to find the most amount of relics and artifacts around a hot spring than anywhere further out from the hot spring. So they
Yeah.
were able to conclude that no matter where there was a hot spring around the world, people congregated around it. And I
Mm.
think it's back to evolution. Life evolved in hot, wet places.
Mhm.
Like it's
Mhm.
part of who we are at the most microscopic level. Even
Mhm.
animals love hot water.
Yeah.
So my dream is to open a bathhouse here in Baltimore, and I'm actually on my way. We
Yeah.
recently acquired a property, and now we're talking to architects and builders and putting together funds to build the first bathhouse in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Bathhouses are all over New York right now. They are sprouting out left and right, and they're doing really well in terms of being a successful business and drawing a lot of people in and healing a lot of people. So
Yeah.
this is kind of like my next step in bringing more healthcare to a bigger audience
Mhm.
because hot water and cold, we're going to have a lot of cold water there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hot water and cold water is very healing for different reasons. Because just like bringing us back to the acute stressor, being in a sauna, in a steam room, in a hot tub is an acute stressor. It elevates your heart rate. It makes you very resilient. Same thing with the cold water. It's an acute stressor. And the two together are extremely therapeutic. There's a reason why the entire world always was gravitating towards a bathhouse culture. People innately understood that when I do this, I feel better. And this
Mhm.
was before science proved that, yes, when you do this, you get better because we can see it through blood work, through imaging, through anything, any other kind of tests. But people just felt, right, innately felt that I feel better when I expose myself to cold water and hot water.
Yeah.
And this is the next step in the evolution of my practice of bringing something bigger to the general population so that I can help a bigger community.
Mhm. Beautiful. I'm so excited to visit. Are you thinking 2026 or maybe
Yeah.
27? Okay. Okay. I can wait a
2026,
year.
2027. Yeah,
Okay. We'll hope for sooner rather than later.
absolutely.
And where can people find you if they want to follow this project or connect with you personally?
Sure, yes. So they can find me on my website, physicamedica.net. Maybe we can put something up on the screen or maybe like in the description down below. You can
Yes,
find me on my
certainly.
website, and my website has really easy ways of sending me a message, emailing me, texting me. So if you have any questions about any things that we discussed today, from the Wim Hof method to the manual therapy to the overall physical therapy, just being a healthier person, you can always reach me there. And then if you have questions about the bathhouse, we can always talk about that too.
Yes, amazing. Thank you so much, Max. I want to ask you a couple fun lightning round questions. All right, needles or ice baths? Which one do people fear more?
Ice baths.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I when I thought of that one, I was like, I feel like the jury's out, but it's ice baths. That's
Yeah, for sure.
interesting. All right, describe your ultimate self-care day in 3 words.
Massage, bathhouse, great meal.
Yes, yes, yes. If you weren't in this
Great meal is
field,
2 words, but
yeah, one
there is
consonant,
a
2
hyphen
words.
in there, I think.
Yeah. If you weren't in this field, what would you be doing?
Working with animals.
I love that. You already kind of answered this, but what is the craziest place you've done a cold plunge?
Norway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We hiked into the forest through three foot snow, maybe 4 feet of snow. We hiked through the forest, came upon what maybe was a river, but the guy was like, yeah, yeah, this is a river, even though it was just like white. Everything was just covered in snow. We took shovels and we started shoveling, basically like clearing out like a driveway and got down to the ice. I'm like, oh yeah, there is a river here. Then we took um fireman axes and started to hammer through axe through the actual ice, 6 inches worth of it. Then once we made a hole, we took 6 foot long saws and put it in and started to essentially carve out a 8 by 8 slab in the ice, got rid of it, and then took off our clothes and got
Yeah.
in the water.
That is so intense. It was a
Yeah,
beautiful visual at first of this like snowy hike through the forest. And then, no, you guys just got to work, got in the cold. And I also
yeah.
want to say, please never cold plunge in the wild or wilderness alone. It's really, really dangerous, especially not to the degree that you do it without extensive training. There are techniques that you're using with the breath, mindset, gradual cold exposure to build up to these levels and this capacity. And that's an important note. If you're just beginning, the shower is a safe place, and also not to do like breath work while driving or while cold plunging is also very dangerous. These are separate practices. So
You're absolutely right. You should be a Wim Hof Method instructor, Emily. Absolutely right. Nailed it. You
there
should
you
never cold plunge by yourself in nature. You should never do the Wim Hof breath work in the water. You should never do the breath work while driving or operating any machinery. You
go.
shouldn't do it when you're pregnant. You shouldn't ice plunge if you're epileptic. There are definitely faux pas when it comes to the method. This is why I recommend find if you're interested in the Wim Hof method, go on the Wim Hof Method website and find a practitioner near you.
Hmm.
Take an introductory course, learn the ins and outs, learn the do's, learn the don'ts, so that you
Hmm.
can do it safely and not hurt yourself or any of your loved ones or friends.
Yeah. Exactly. Breath work and cold exposure are so accessible. That's what makes them such powerful tools, and that they are essentially, fail proof if you meet the requirements to do them safely. But there are a few caveats there. So it's really important to set yourself up for success and then to just go for it, jump in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you so, so much, Max. This conversation was amazing, and I think is going to be really informative and enlightening to so many of our viewers. So thank you for your time, for your
Of course, you're so
education.
welcome.
I look forward to visiting the bathhouse soon. I cannot wait.
Cannot wait either. It's
It's
gonna be great.
time for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up. It's time for us to